ago, I was putting out videos talking about how we have to wait and see what's going to take place when it comes to the tariff and the tariff impact, because I never really truly believed that there was going to be any kind of real significant impact from the tariffs to begin with, outside of the credible threats and the people's reactions to those credible threats. Here it is 6 months later, and that's what's turning out to be the case. That the threats of tariffs had far more of an impact on the psyche of the people, of the markets, of the economy than the actual resulting effects of tariffs being like this major profound thing that was happening. I got this article coming out of Yahoo Finance. I think it was covering Fortune. Yeah, it was covering a Fortune article. It's called Old Bark No Bite. Trump's latest trade war turns into another taco salad for Wall Street. And again, what had I been saying, right? What tariffs? What tariff workarounds? What exemptions? What way are they going to be able to figure out how it is that they can work the system and not be impacted by the tariffs? Here we got 6 months on. The story looks different. Much of the initial panic has faded, right? The panic that was really resulting in the economic impact was literally that, the panic, not the actual results of tariffs, but that panic, replaced by recognition that the real economic impact of Trump's tariff has been softened by carve-outs, negotiated deals, and exemptions. Very much in line with what it is that I have been saying. Now, this was probably one of the easier predictions that I was able to make when it comes to thinking about what it is that the administrations or any administration can do to try and bring manufacturing back to this country. Tariffs was never going to do it. When they used that as an excuse to try and bring good jobs back to the United States, I said, this is not what they are going to do. This is not what is going to happen from the tariffs. Manufacturing is not coming back to the United States in any significant way. Now, what these tariffs did do is create an inflation expectation, which did have a profound impact on the economy. And with that elevated inflation expectation, it raised the neutral interest rate and it made the economy far less restricted than anybody had ever given it consideration for. The problem with that being is that it only benefited the rich. See, the bottom 80% of the people did not get any benefit from that whatsoever. But the top 20%, they did quite well. In fact, you can see it within their consuming. The top 10% of households are doing 50% of the consumption now. Back in the 90s, it was 35%. So it's not like the top households, top income earners of the top 20% of household income, it's not like they are suffering any kind of consequences of what has taken place. They're increasing their consumption. That means they're doing far better than anybody had ever given any kind of credit for or expectation to. But when you think about what it is that these tariffs had really done, it literally benefited, stimulated the top richest percent of people out there, the top 20%. See, it did it with elevated interest rates. If you have assets that are going to have a bigger return because of interest rates being elevated, who is it that owns the assets? All right? The top household incomes. Top 20% of people own the assets. And so when interest rates are going up, those people who own those assets, who are having a return on capital investment, they get more money, right? They get more money on their bonds, they get more money on their money market accounts, they get more money. And then they get to deploy that money into an economy that is far less restricted than anybody had ever given it consideration for. Here we have inflation that is coming down. I mean, 2.9, 2.3, 3.1. What is modestly above 2%? What is the 2% target? Are we that far away from it, considering that the Federal Reserve has never been able to achieve a 2% target? It seems to me that everything that's happened over the last 6 months has done an incredible number benefiting the top wealthy household incomes, while the bottom 80% suffer the consequences from it. See, it worked because they were trying to stimulate the economy. But you're not involved. Like 80% of the people, the working class individual, that's not who they were concerned about. They were concerned about increasing consumption. And the increase of consumption is really only going to come from the top household incomes. The rest, 80% of the people, they're not going to participate in the same fashion. And now when you really think about this, if these tariffs, a big what if, right? A big what if these tariffs happen to be proved illegal by the Supreme Court, and all the money that had been paid in tariffs by these corporations get reimbursed. So not only have they passed on some cost to the consumer out there who is paying higher prices, because everybody seems to talk about it, these tariffs are killing business, killing the consumption, killing everything out there. Well, that's 80% of the people suffering. Now, if they passed on these costs to the people who have paid it, and then at the same time, these corporations are reimbursed from the tariffs that they had paid, think about how stimulating that is for those corporations. See, it's a new game that they play. There was a time back in the day when the Federal Reserve would look at a slowdown in the economy and try to react in a particular fashion. They would react in the lowering of interest rates. That lowering of interest rates would get people to borrow money. Borrowing that money, going out there and spending it on houses and cars and going on vacation. But really, what ended up happening is corporations borrowed the money and started investing into their business. And part of that was hiring people. And when you start hiring people and people have more employment, they start working, they get new money, and they spend that money into the economy, and it increases consumption. And this is the way the Federal Reserve would typically try to deal with a recession. Economic slowdown, they would lower interest rates. Eventual stimulus would get into the economy through the added consumption and these corporations investing, those people getting hired. That increases the consumption even more. Inflationary pressures are found. This is how the Fed operated. Well, now they can lower interest rates and it doesn't create the inflationary pressure that it once had. We've experienced that after the great financial crisis. Quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 and zero interest rate policy failed to produce an inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. Now, I know a lot of people might argue with that, saying, oh, just look at houses, look at bond market, look at stock market. Yeah, you can look at the things that people have borrowed money to buy and watch those assets go up. But ultimately, the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for did not manifest itself after that. In fact, there is a great speech given by John Williams talking about that very thing, monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, where he was complaining about the fact that there was no or low inflation that was interfering with the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. And that the problem they needed to solve was an inflation expectation that was persistently high rather than too low. Now, understanding that to be the case is very, obscure to a lot of people out there. But once you recognize it and once you see it, now it makes a lot more sense because they couldn't stimulate the economy like they used to. See, lowering interest rates would stimulate the economy. Now lowering interest rates doesn't really stimulate the economy. That was proven after the great financial crisis. Oh, it'll separate the rich from the poor and asset prices will go up, but it doesn't necessarily stimulate the economy in the fashion that the Federal Reserve was looking for, and that is the consumption of the people, the working class, increasing. Didn't take place. So now they have to look at it much differently. And they're well, if they're going to increase consumption, it's not through the lowering of interest rates, because the lowering of interest rates used to be when the corporations would then hire and get that hiring increase would then create the inflationary pressure from all these people working. That doesn't work anymore. Now they look and focus to the top 20% of people, top 20% of household incomes. If you can create a situation in which that those people get more money, those people are going to go out there and start consuming. And since they do 70% of the consumption, everybody else is really out of view. It's not important to them anymore. So how does this work now when you have this situation in which that lowering interest rates really doesn't benefit 80% of the people out there by getting corporations to hire them, and that added hiring starts giving them the benefit of being able to become a consumer? if that doesn't work for it anymore or work for the central banks anymore, how is it that they're going to stimulate the economy? Like this, right? Very much like they're doing over the last 6 months. In fact, really, it's been going on for since COVID. Right? How are they getting the money into the rich? Elevated interest rates. At the same time, how is it becoming a benefit to them when you have inflationary scenarios? The inflationary scenario is low. So here you have a credible threat of tariffs that elevate the inflation expectation. It raises the neutral interest rate, which is the rate that the Federal Reserve is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It raises that neutral interest rate, making it ever closer to the Fed funds rate, making the economy far less restricted. It's benefiting the top 20% of people. And at the same time, you're seeing the inflationary scenario not nearly as elevated as people want to be in fear of it being. Right? Like, I mean, they want to say that inflation is running out of control, but really 2.9%, 2.3%, is that really out of control? I mean, if the Federal Reserve ran at 3% or 1% consistently for the rest of history, what would the average inflation rate be? 2%, right on target. So if they ran 3% or 1% from now on, they would still be achieving their goal. This was a benefit to the rich. The credible threat of tariffs gave a stimulating effect to the rich. And if you remove the credible threat of tariffs, especially with the idea of reimbursing the corporations from all the tariffs all the money that they have spent on tariffs, if you reimburse it, think about what that does. It is a stimulating effect directly going back to these corporations, but you don't have to go and bail them out. They're forced to pay. They're forced to give back the money, right? Through the reimbursement of the tariffs that were found, if they happen to found illegal. And it benefits the rich again. You see how they keep funneling the money to the rich? It's going to continue this way. There's really no other path in which that the central banks or the powers that be can go down, other than the one of what we were experiencing. If they try to condition the economy to retract the money supply, the whole thing will begin to collapse. If they inject ever increasing amounts of new money into the system, the inequality will continue to grow. Now, how is it that you are going to figure out a way to continue the system, continue the consuming here inside of the American economy, if 80% of the people go out there and get a job that doesn't really provide them with any kind of benefit in the way that says, hey, I can go out there and I can achieve what it was once believed as the American dream. Like, you go out there and you go get a good job and it barely makes it through the month. Right? See, this is the unfortunateness that we now experience, is that day jobs, regular jobs, even a good career job, doesn't really cut it anymore. It doesn't work. So no matter what they do to try and stimulate the economy, we're not it. We're not what's in view. We're not what's in focus anymore. Because they could go and give us all kinds of money and we would barely be able to increase our consumption like what the top 20% of people can do. So are they going to work really hard to make sure that we have good pay and that we can go out there and save and we can go out there and provide a good consumer to the economy? No, they don't care about us anymore because we're just not in a position in which that can happen. See, back in the day when we had good manufacturing jobs, it would have worked. Okay? You could have gone and got a good manufacturing job, and with that good manufacturing job, be able to spend that money into the economy in a profound way that would actually make a difference. Today, it's not the same thing. You're not going to be able to increase your wages enough that's going to stimulate the economy through consumption like what they can do with the top 20% of people. And that's the scariness. That's how, understanding that is how I know that these tariffs were not going to work. Not going to work in the way that people thought that they were. They totally worked. Like, they totally worked. but it wasn't like what people thought that they were going to do. They thought that tariffs were going to bring manufacturing back to the United States and make America great again. What it did is it funneled money to the rich, and it's going to continue funneling money to the rich. You think about it, you start removing these tariffs from the market's mindset, which is already pretty much, ignoring them now. I mean, even in this article, what do they say that Trump tries to reignite the trade war with overnight announcement of a slew of tariffs, including 100% tariff on branded, patented pharmaceuticals and 50% tariff on furniture imports. Markets are barely reacting. They don't care anymore. They're like, oh yeah, and babbling on again and more about more tariffs that don't really do anything. That's literally what the people are thinking nowadays. Like at first they were very upset about it, but now it's been going on for a while. They don't care, right? The real level of tariffs is much lower, which is one of the reasons the impact has been muted. That's this economist, or who is this, Brown? Who is this they're interviewing? Michael Brown, global investment strategist at Franklin Templeton, said that the markets regard tariffs as over, right? And that's when he goes on to say the real level of tariffs is much lower, which is one of the reasons the impact has been muted. Right? What tariffs? I knew it the whole time. Now, I knew it was going to have a real reaction from the people, from the markets, and the behavior, but the ultimate goal was never on the table, right? That bringing good manufacturing jobs back, to bring money to what was it? God, what did this is going to make them pay, and China is the cheap ripper-offerer, right? Remember you use that? It's like I've never heard that term before. I've studied a lot of economics, and I've never heard of a cheap ripper-offerer, right? But that's how Trump described China, as a cheap ripper-offerer. And I'm thinking to myself, China goes and takes their skill, their effort, their resources, their energy, their people, and they build products that we buy. And then when we buy it with an empty paper promise to pay into the future with another empty paper promise. And then they're the chief ripper-offerer? And I'm thinking, who is it that's really benefiting with this global trade? I mean, Trump kept saying the United States is getting ripped off. And I'm thinking, how? How is it that we buy stuff from the globe with an empty paper promise to pay into the future with another empty paper promise, and they're somehow ripping us off? And I'm thinking, I don't want this system to end. I mean, I love the luxurious experience that we get here in the United States, being able to buy up the global resources of the world from all the wonderful products that they build and everything else. And really, we don't have to even work for it. All we have to do is just issue out more debt. That's a pretty unique situation. It's not going to last, but dang, it's pretty nice to be here right now, right? And to think somehow that the world is ripping the United States off, and I think to myself, man, everybody's got that backwards, don't they? It seems to me that paying somebody with an empty paper promise to pay in the future with another empty paper promise is the chief ripper-offerer. But I like the situation we're in. I like the position. I like all that wonderful stuff that the world continues to send us, because we're the consumer of the world. See, here in the United States, we produce a consumer. That's what we produce. We don't produce stuff. I mean, you can see, like, we have a hell of a time competing against anybody else out there when it comes to growing or producing or making or doing anything. The only thing we're really good at is war and some agriculture, a little bit of technology, and it's definitely not enough to supply us with all the wonderful things that we need from the world that is supplying us with all those wonderful things. All right. I got a super chat here. Let me go and read that. Maybe I'll chill out a little bit. I'm kind of babbling on here. Where is it? Wow, it's way back there. I'm sorry I missed that. All right, Edgar Vales, thank you so much for the $2.99. Next time. All right, thank you for the super sticker. I really appreciate it. We're not going to be out here too long. I got to go and call bingo here in a little bit. But I just really wanted to bring this article up and share with you how it is that the tariffs were not going, like, how I've never really viewed the tariffs in the way that everybody else was looking at them. You know, everybody else talked about how destructive they were and how they were, you know, how they were going to bring all this manufacturing back and how they were going to make these countries pay and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, like, and I don't think any of that stuff. I mean, it probably like some of it'll happen, like those things would probably occur so that you could talk about it, but it's not going to have any kind of meaningful impact on the economy in any kind of real significant way. Like they're not going to bring manufacturing back. You're not going to be able to slow down the trade deficit. Like you could probably slow it down, but you're not going to stop it, right? You're not going to stop the trade deficit. We are going to import more than we export. We import stuff, we export money. That's what we do. That's the job of the United States. That's the job of the World Reserve, the custodian of the World Reserve currency. That's our job, right? Is to produce money and get it out there for the world to use. And the only way to do that is to produce a consumer in the United States. By producing a consumer, we will buy the stuff and export the money. And that's the job of the United States as the World Reserve custodian of the World Reserve currency. It's called Triffin's Dilemma, right? In that they realized it a long time ago that the United States will destroy its manufacturing base, everything that it's got going on to try and provide the world with the money, right? And it's the demand for money that is outside of the United States that is doing this. It doesn't have anything to do with the United States, really, other than we are the custodian of the dollar, right? We have the dollar. The people out there have written debts that are due in dollars. They're doing transactions in dollars. And if we do not provide the world with those dollars, then the dollar will strengthen and we will destroy our own economy because of it. Like we are stuck. We are stuck in a position in which that more money needs to be created, and the more money that is created, and it's not even money, it's debt issuance, currency and debt. That's what it is. Currency and debt needs to be issued, and if it's not issued, a collapse of the system will take place. As it is issued, more inequality will happen. But what happens when you can't export the money? How can you not export the money? Why would you not be able to export the money? I mean, they give it away. Like, for one, they just like literally hand it out there to other countries. And unless the consumer, which would be all the American people out there, made a conscious choice to stop buying into luxurious experiences, the exporting of the money will continue. Because we buy stuff. We buy the stuff of the world. Right? All this stuff, right? It all comes from some other nation out there. So all this stuff that we enjoy, like people say, well, we can make it ourselves. No, we can't. We, like that little, I got a little kid's plastic chair sitting over there. I think it costs like $15. If we were to make it here, well, it probably is made here in the United States. What I guess I'm getting at is, if you were to take, well, here's a good example. Let's just take something that's actually existing right now. Soybeans, right? So you got these soybeans. We are a major producer of soybeans, and we were sending those soybeans over to China. Now, China cut us off. They said, no, we don't want your soybeans anymore. Go screw yourself. You got this whole trade war thing going on, and Trump's pissing us off. We don't want your beans no more. Keep your beans. Okay? So it's just like, okay, no problem. It's a global commodity. Other people out there in the world would want to buy it. Here, why don't we just send it out there to somebody else in the world to buy it? Oh, here's a pretty interesting thing. Nobody else wants to buy our beans because they're too expensive. Every other nation out there in the world can produce soybeans far cheaper than what you can produce here in the United States. Now, is there a position in which that the United States can grow an abundance of soybeans at a particular cost and then get that out there to the world? Yeah, there's probably some out there. Like you have such a major commercial farm producing soybeans that you can produce them and sell them at such a cheap cost. But you have to be a huge producer of soybeans in order to meet that sort of level. The average farmer out there ain't going to be able to make their interest payments. They're not going to be able to, like, because they got to lease out equipment, lease out land, higher labor, there's all kinds of costs that go into it. And as those costs go up and the price of soybeans go down because China is no longer buying them, and now you got an abundance of soybeans to sell, those prices come down, farmers are out of the game. Huh? You can't just go find another buyer for it. China was the buyer. Just like all those other nations out there are not going to find another consumer. The United States is the consumer. So as they say, well, we'll just cut the United States off and find somebody else to sell our goods to. There ain't nobody else. There ain't nobody else who buys like the United States buys. We buy everything from everyone. Okay? And if you were to try and sell that stuff to somebody else, there isn't enough purchasing power out there in the world like the United States has. And it's quite unfortunate. The more this goes on, the more the inequality is going to grow, right? And the more difficult it's going to be on the average everyday citizen out there trying to figure out how to stretch their day job out. And that's what's most unfortunate about it again, is that the promise of bringing a good position back to the United States, like, hey, we're gonna really work hard and inflict all these tariffs, and we're gonna go into this trade war, and I promise you, the American people, we are going to have a good manufacturing base again for you, so that you got good American hardworking jobs that are gonna be enough to provide for a family and a wife and a kids and all the other stuff that you can imagine, and it's all gonna come to you. It's not. It's not. It was artistic fantasy. It was never going to happen. What was going to happen is exactly the results that we have today. Ever increasing amounts of separation. The rich are getting richer. The rich are consuming more. They're in a position in which that they are doing quite well, and 80% of the people are failing. Or failing to understand what it is that they can do to try and get themselves on the other side of the wedge. Because back in the day, we all worked hard, and by working hard, you got what hard work deserved, which was a good outcome. Now you can work as hard as you want. It doesn't matter. You can be as disciplined, you can be as trustworthy, you can do all the right things, and it still won't be enough. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be like the doomsdayer, the guy who's just like, trying to rain on the parade or something of that nature. It's just the simple facts of how the Cantillon effect works. Like, if you can recognize this through history, if you can see it happening time and time again, then why try to reinvent the wheel? It's obvious. If you inject new money into the system, you will have inequality. If you have inequality, the top percent of household incomes are going to be the important factor when it comes to a consumer-based economy. Everybody else, like, there was a time when we were manufacturers. That would have been like the important thing to look at. How do we get more manufacturing taking place? Because if we can get more manufacturing happening, get those products out there to the world will send us the money, and that would benefit the American people. It's out the game. 80% average American is in debt, and this is what you call fine. Actually, we have all dare Slayer. They're missing from the chat today. All right, you can't churn back on a sellout. Grow your own. Ask the question and dig. You will find who runs it all. Samsung new solid-state battery technology incorporates silver carbon composite layer, enhancing safety, energy density, and charging speed. Each battery packs may require about 1 kilogram of silver. The attitude of the people needs to change to an FU attitude. And then what would you do with that? Like, if you did that with, like, if you had this FU attitude towards everything, and it was just like, okay, so what do you plan on doing? See, like, a lot of times when I listen and I talk to people and they think, oh man, everything's about ready to fail, everything's going, and then they want to invest into failure. Like, they want to invest in a way that says, how do I position my money so when the collapse happens, I become super rich? And I think to myself, you want to become rich on failure? Is that like ultimately the question? I mean, you want to figure out how to become rich on failure, right? And I think to myself, well, the rich got rich on tariff failure, right? I mean, you want to get rich on failure, and here a bunch of rich top 20% of household incomes were able to increase their consumption during a time when everybody else was suffering the consequences of it. They seem to be making money in failure. What are we doing? Right? I mean, are we trying to invest into failure? Because if we're waiting for failure to take place, who's going to benefit, right? Where are you going to benefit at that? See, this is what I'm saying. It's like failure's happening now, and there's people who are now separating themselves from everybody else while we're waiting for the failure. And I just don't see it anymore. You know, marketing drives the consumption. I think America needs to be divided east and west. Towards the banks, politicians, elite, class, that's your opponent. Okay, so here's the thing. You're gonna put this expectation or this internal or external expectation that there's gonna be some sort of change out there. So now I have a decision that I have to make. I have to make every single day. I have to do the right thing, right? I have to go out there and I have to chase the money, chase the success, chase the excellence, do something out there. But now I also have to incorporate this wall of worry that says, well, they're the problem. Now I got a finger to point at the politicians, at the corporations, at the bankers, all these different people, and say, there's the problem. That's who did it. And that's the guy we need to change. And I point and point and point, right? And the moment that you change one of them, another thing will pop up and say, well, there's the problem. And once you get rid of that problem, another problem will pop up. And you'll keep pointing at the problems out there saying, that's it, that's it, that's it, that's the thing. But never once ever looking at yourself for what decision that you need to make, considering that you're seeing all this stuff going on out there. So you're exporting the problem to the external, saying it's not my problem, it's their fault. Right? The moment that you do that, you can no longer internalize the problem for yourself and say, okay, I need to internalize this so that I can make the best and most appropriate decisions for myself. See, it's heavy. It's like you look at it, it's like, no, man, look at them. They're evil intent. There's all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, that is heavy to look at. You're right. There's a lot going on right there. Now, I can use this to say, man, they're my fault. They're the fault. They're the problems that I have. Now, I can also look at that and say, okay, what is it that I need to do with this information so that I can better myself? Right? Because there's nothing you're going to do to change the external. Even if you did change the external, something else will pop up that'll show some kind of failure that's taken place within it. And this is really how it is that most people end up looking at politics, looking at the economy, looking at everything out there, is that they do not internalize the problem for themselves, saying, okay, yes, it is horrid out there. It's bad. It's a horrible situation to deal with. How is it that I internalize that so that I can make the best and most appropriate decisions for me and my family? Because I can't change it. I can't change what's going on out there. All right, you're right, Simon. But personally, I don't play their game with them. I play against them. Again, man, I mean, it was just like I used to look at the world in a very negative way. I believed the New World Order was coming after me. I proved it to myself. I tried to explain it to other people. I did lots and lots of research. I could go on about it for hours about how it is that it was happening, and I proved it to myself. The New World Order will take you out. That's what was happening to me. I was 40 years old, broke, in debt, depressed, had nothing going on, drinking a lot, right? Blaming the New World Order for everything, blaming the politicians for everything, blaming the bankers for everything. Like there was nothing in my life that I could look at that says, man, the reason why I'm here right now is because of them and what they had done and all the other crap that they are pulling off. I said it over and over again, and I proved it time and time again. I proved it to myself. And then one day I said, I got to stop blaming them. I got to look at this stuff for myself. I got to start making appropriate decisions for myself, because there's people out there who are absolutely killing it, and I'm not one of them. Why? What is it that they're doing? What is it that they know? What is it that they have in their arsenal of experience in life that says they can make it, but I can't? Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then I realized it's because of my attitude and the way that I was thinking and the way that I internalized the problems and the people that I was blaming. And I never really turned to myself and said, dude, you're the problem. You're your own problem. The way that you are handling your situation is the problem. Change the way that you are looking at the world. Change the way that you are conducting yourself. Change the way that you feel about everything that's going on out there as far as who it is that you're going to blame. And you internalize that to now make better decisions for yourself. Do the next right thing. And I started taking steps down that road, and the whole world became better. I couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, I realized the New World Order doesn't interfere in my life. The politicians, they don't interfere in my life. The central banking system doesn't interfere in my life when it used to hold me down. It used to keep me from being successful. Now it doesn't do that. That's weird. I wonder how that happened. Maybe it was because of the way that I internalized that information and the way that I was dealing with it. All right. So I just don't blame them anymore. Like, you can even see it. Like, I wear the end the Fed hat and stuff like that. But even the idea of ending the Fed, generally, most of the people who have the end the Fed attitude have a much different view of it. They look at end the Fed in a reasoning behind it is like, they're causing inflation and they're doing all these problems and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, no, don't say that. Don't say they're causing inflation, because they want you to say that it's causing inflation. They wanted that from you. Every end the Fed, or anybody who was out there saying end the Fed type of belief and then pushing the hyperinflation scenario with it was a total benefit to the Federal Reserve. They were looking for that exact thing to happen. This guy is over here telling me to change the way I think. You tell us that you need to come out here and do these podcasts for money because your day job doesn't cut it. First of all, deplorable, my day job does cut it. Okay? My day job does cut it. I can pay all my bills with my day job. Now, if I want anything good in my life, I'm going to have to do extra. And now part of that, here in a few hours, is going to my side hustle where I call bingo. Because this isn't the only place I try to make money. And it's not just the YouTube channel, it's not just bingo, and it's not just my day job, and it's not just the side sales that I try to do, and it's not just all the other stuff that I combine to put together so that I can have a decent life. And people say, oh man, you just come out here to make money? I mean, dude, I make money at everything that I do constantly on every fashion. There's nothing that I don't do to try and make money. In every way. YouTube happens to be one of them. Is it a significant one? It sure is. Yeah. All right. Simon works a steady job. Says a lot to me. Always appreciate that. Love your local hillbilly. Well, thank you so much, because I get a lot of hell out here because people are like, it's funny. A lot of people look at YouTubers out there and they say, oh man, all YouTubers, especially successful ones who have 100,000 subscribers, all are just instantaneous millionaires or something like that. That is so far from the truth. Ad revenue can be decent. At times it can be really good, right? For the most part, it's just okay. The way that most YouTubers make money is through sponsors, and they make a lot of money doing sponsorships. There's people with half the amount of subscribers who make 3 times the amount of money, maybe even 4 or 5 times the amount of money that I make on YouTube. Simply by taking sponsorships. I don't do it. I don't sell you anything. Right? I come out here, I share information, I try to be entertaining, and for that, I would hope to get a little bit of ad revenue if I'm going to get any kind of money from it. I could be trying to sell you something. And for the next 60 seconds, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor. Right? I don't do that. I mean, I have done it in the past, but I don't do that because I'm out here trying to be honest with you guys and showing you what it is that I am seeing from a working class point of view and trying to use this understanding of the economic forces to better myself, to position myself. And now Many people say, oh, we can't all have a YouTube job. No, you're right, but we can all have a second job, I bet, because I worked this YouTube like it was a second job, right? Like I could have done a second job and done the exact same thing that I did with YouTube. All right. May I share an interesting video link on the live stream? It's not selling anything. Yeah, go for it, Dave. All right, you're the man with the plan. I don't know if I necessarily have the plan, right? Like I try to make the next right decision. I try to put money towards, some sort of savings, some sort of retirement, try to put money towards, having some sort of fun with my family. I tried to be aware of what it is that I am doing out there because there was a time I wasn't aware of anything. I wasn't trying to be. I didn't care, right? I didn't care about, anything going on out there. I just figured it was all going to fail eventually anyway, so why care about it? All right. Do you have 150? You have 158 subs, and we're effing proud of you. Well, thank you, Deja Vu. I really appreciate it. And I never really, I think I found like the idea of having 100,000 subscribers or 150,000 subscribers. Like when I had 30 or 40 going on to 50,000 subscribers, I felt like a much bigger YouTuber than I do today, right? Like on the way up, it was just blowing up and everything was happening. It was all new. And I thought to myself, holy moly, this is really happening. Look at this 50,000 subscribers. It's like legit. It's actually there. And then it got to the 100,000 and I got the plaque and I was just like, oh my gosh. Like I got recognized by YouTube. I got the silver play button, it's like it hangs on my wall. It's just amazing. And then after that, it's like being like this idea of a YouTube star, it just kind of vanished. I went and did rebel capitalist stuff. I went and did all these speaking engagements, which was just incredible. I got to do these public speaking things like I had never done before. Got to share my opinions on stage in front of people, and I thought, man, that is absolutely incredible. But I didn't think of myself as like a YouTube star or anything like that. And I still don't. I just think of myself as an average dude. I'm just a regular dude who figured out how it is that I could do this thing on YouTube, but really, I don't think about it much differently than if I had a different business or something. Like if I was doing a construction job or something like that, that's kind of the way I feel about it. I don't have like this major importance put on it. It just feels very normal. That's the way it feels. It didn't feel normal in the beginning, right? It was very new and it was exciting and it was weird, and now it just feels like very normal. It feels like what I should be doing. Do more things at home to save money. Yeah. China is making farm tractors without man driving it using AI. Simon definitely gives off average dude vibes. Well, thank you, Big Bucket. I think I actually appreciate one of your comments for the first time because I am average dude. If I give off average dude vibes because that's who I am. Right? I'm just like everybody else out there. I have a bit of an obsession with economics, and I do like to be somewhat entertaining, going out on stage or even making these videos and stuff like that. So it might be a bit unique, but I'm not anything special than anybody else out there. All right, invest in the like button. The United States is the only consumer for the other countries. What they are going to do without us? They're not. It'll fail. If you guys want to really help the average YouTube like this, don't skip is at the ads. Yeah, that definitely helps. Yeah. And thank you, AZ. I really appreciate it. AZ888. No, Bob, you can say that again. Okay, M Rider 777 consume each other. All right. So does that mean war for other countries? The truth does not require your participation in order to exist. BS does. Terence McKenna. This obsession in economics is such an intellectual journey. Thank you, McLovitz. I really appreciate it, and it is an obsession. I mean, it really became one. When I was failing in, I mean, it was like here it was. I was buying a house, like I didn't know what was going on. My first kid's being born is boring. It's boring. My first kid is about ready to be born. I'm buying a house, I'm working a construction job, and I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing. And then it all starts to come down, right? The great financial crisis kicks in. I lose my job, I lose my house, and I'm just like incredibly depressed, and I have no idea what to do. And I'm just like looking at the internet and I'm studying what I think is like research. And what I'm actually doing is filling my head with a bunch of conspiratorial nonsense. Now, fortunate and unfortunate part of that is that a lot of that conspiratorial stuff is true. Like, in fact, the majority of the stuff that I was looking at was true. The problem that I was facing with it is that there was absolutely nothing that I could do about it. Even with the information, there was nothing that I could really do. I couldn't change the way that I was behaving or anything else that was going to be any kind of benefit to me. It just didn't do anything for me except for drag me down, right? It made me feel depressed. It made me feel like insufficient. It was just like it just wasn't anything benefit to me. And so once I let go of all that and I just started focusing in on the money, I started realizing something different that was taking place. And so as the whole world was coming undone for me, I realized through all the research that I was doing that I was literally looking at stuff that was causing me to be depressed. Right? Once I let go of that and said, okay, I'm just going to let go of everything. And I'm not going to look any research. I'm not going to study anything. I'm not going to read the news. I'm not even going to carry a cell phone or participate in none of it. I'm just letting it go, all of it. Right? And so for like a couple of years, I wasn't involved with anything. I would just show up to work and I would go home and I would play on my little piece of property and raise the chickens and do the thing. And I didn't think about anything else. And I was just diving deeper and deeper and deeper in debt. Yeah. And so after I gave that up and I said, okay, I'm going to go back to doing research again, but this time I'm not going to study all the conspiratorial stuff. I'm going to follow the money. That's it. Just follow the money. Follow the monetary policy. Follow the Federal Reserve. Find out what's going on there because I believe that is the only thing that you should, me personally, should look at in order to conduct yourself because all the rest of the stuff just fills your head with nonsense and garbage. So when I made that decision and I started diving into the Federal Reserve and studying monetary policy and trying to figure out how that monetary policy was being played out, that's when my life started to change and it started getting better. I wasn't drinking as much. I wasn't studying the conspiratorial stuff. I wasn't doing any of those things. I wasn't even following politics or any of that stuff anymore. I was just following the Federal Reserve and my life just kept getting better and better, step by step. And I thought to myself, man, I got to share this with other people. Now I understand why 80% of the people suffer in depressive, very frustrated opinions and they look at politics for it because essentially that's what I was doing. And so I try to get them away from that. Like, don't follow the politics anymore. I mean, it's not a bad thing. What is not healthy is when it overwhelms you. Right? When I see people visibly get frustrated when they talk about what it is that the Trump administration is doing, right? And I laugh at that because sometimes I do get frustrated too, and I get kind of, upset or whatever sounding when I come out here. But really, ultimately, it's, for show, right? Because like I don't really stress about anything. I don't really get upset about anything. I don't think about the failures of the world. I just think about what it is that I need to do about it. When the conspiracy theories fail, you just make your own. Yeah. Jim Summers, don't panic. It's going to be a short stay. What time is it? 50 minutes into this. All right. 221 people watching, 70 likes. Thank you for hitting that like button. Anything else is excessive baggage. It really is. I see that we are basically gone. The system is already taken over. The best we can do is just survive as best we can by keeping our money. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What is keeping your money? Like, to me, keeping your money is like keeping it out of the system. And if you keep it out of the system, then you're almost guaranteed that you're going to be left behind. You know? And then at the same time, if you put it in the system, it's like so much fear and uncertainty and doubt out there that you would absolutely lose it in the system too, that it doesn't really give you any kind of good, confident feeling of what it is that you do need to do. And see, this is where I think a lot of times, like, I don't stress about it either way. I have a position in gold to try and be outside of the third party claim. I take a position in the stock market for obvious reasons. The stock market just keeps going up. I try to be in real estate by being in, buying a house to live in. Like, everything that I do has a little piece of the game. And I don't stress about any one of them failing or being incredibly successful because I don't have that much in any one of them. Like, the most that I have is probably in the house that I live in. Right? That's where probably most of the money went. $42,000 down to just even get into it. And then all the payments that have gone into it ever since then, I've definitely put a lot of money into real estate when it comes to just even living in this house. But then I also have a stock portfolio. I have gold and silver. I have Bitcoin. I have, things going on that gives me different positions in all kinds of stuff. I don't think about the failure. I just don't. All right, uneducated economist, when inflation expectations are considered, is it like a generalization of it? The totality of inflation and expectation data, or bit of both? When inflation expectations are considered, is it like a generalization of it? The totality of inflation and expectation data, or bit of both? Well, I mean, I think inflation expectations lead to real inflation. So when it comes to like management of the inflation expectation, I think really it's not trying to necessarily manage or lock in our current inflation expectation, but to lock in a long-term inflation expectation. Like, how many people, if you were to ask, what is the Fed's inflation goal? Everybody would say the same thing, 2%. Right? It's 2%. It's 2%. They don't see it any. In fact, if you were to say, hey, if they were to have any other view of inflation, what do you think that would be? Everybody would say there is none. Right? That's the only view of inflation that the people have of the Federal Reserve and their expectations of where they're trying to get to is 2%. Right? That is locking in the inflation expectations, at least the long-term inflation expectations. Now, you have a short-term inflation expectation that is also very manipulative, right? Or it can be manipulated through the Federal Reserve speak, or through the administration, or through the mainstream media. But that short-term inflation expectation, although does have an impact into the economy in a way, it is not necessarily the concern of like management of the Federal Reserve to make sure it's like, oh, these guys have an elevated inflation expectation, we need to get it back down to 2%. I don't think that's part of the concern, right? Like, they can elevate the short-term inflation expectation and then not be concerned about the long-term inflation expectation. Like, you elevate right now, everybody's worried, but next year they're not so worried. A year after that, they're back to normal, and so on and so on. But it does, it's two different views. One of them is the actual inflation numbers, and then the other one is the inflation expectation that's out there. Christopher Simon, she's away from politics. I can't say I blame him, but you're right. Politics definitely affects the economy. Jeff, you're wrong. Hold on. Where is it? Give me 1 second here. Actually, I don't need to go over there and get it. No, I will. I will because it's right there. Let's get into the book. Let's go and talk to the guy who has been guiding us through the economic forces since pretty much, not the beginning of this channel, but way into this channel. What does he say? When confronted by extraneous factors such as politics, Cantillon insisted that such considerations be put aside, so not to complicate our subject. He said, thus invoking a kind of ceteris paribus. I'm not. What is let's find out what ceteris paribus means. Paribus. What does that mean? It's some kind of Latin term. I don't know what that means. What is that setter? Whoops. Ceteris paribus. There we go. With other conditions remaining the same. All right, man, that was pretty simple. Okay, with other conditions remaining the same. Assumption before it became fashionable to do so in the okay. Let me see, where else does he talk about it? Anyway, let me go back to the beginning here. Following a century of neglect, William Stanley Jevons, in the first blush of discovery, proclaimed Cantillon's essay the cradle of political economy. Subsequent growth and development of economic thought has not really alerted us to the subtleties of the succinct appraisal, succulent appraisal. Jeez, man, all these words. See, this is the problem with being an uneducated economist, is that they use these words that I have to go and look up and then learn the definition of them and then realize, oh man, that was probably, could have been said so much easier.
Succinct.
Succinct. All right. Use short, succinct sentences, briefly or clearly expressed. Okay. This succinct appraisal, a cradle holds new life, and there can be little doubt that the essay added new life to organizing principles of economics, but, quote, political economy does not accurately describe the subject that Cantillon addressed. Indeed, he scrupulously avoided political issues in order to concentrate on the mechanics of the 18th century economic life. When confronted by the extraneous factors such as politics, Cantillon insisted that such considerations be put aside. All right? So understanding economic forces, you have to set the politics aside, or else you're not going to be able to see them. You will blame everything on politics instead of looking at the underlying economic forces. And it's easy to blame politics because there's so much blame to go around. But the fact is, stay up right here, guys. Oh, dang it. What's going on here? There we go. All right. Trying to put a wind shield up there because the sun's coming through and it's going to start cooking my phone. Anyway, I should probably call it quits here in just a minute anyway. But to understand that politics will interfere with your view of the underlying economic forces, because people will then witness and see the problems within the economy. They will recognize the symptoms out there, and then they will blame the politicians for the symptoms, not understanding that there is an economic force that is creating it. Right? Very much like, how many times have you heard people blame politics or greed or manipulation for sending the domestic manufacturers out of this nation? It wasn't that they were sending the domestic manufacturers out of this nation. Cantillon described it very well, right? That you can no longer compete against cheaper manufacturers out there. And no matter what you do, no matter how much government intervention or anything else that you try, what you will end up with is even more government intervention to try and protect that domestic manufacturing base, only to find that it will become less and less and less profitable until it finally disappears. All right. All right, moving on. The reason why I don't get into politics of it is because it'll literally interfere with your ability to view the underlying economic forces. In fact, if you incorporate politics into it, you have to ignore the economic forces. You literally have to you have to dismiss Cantillon effect, you have to dismiss Gresham's law, you have to dismiss Treffin's dilemma, you have to dismiss all that stuff and say none of it exists anymore, because the only way that the politicians actually interfere with the economy is if you ignore the underlying economic forces. And then they will, right? Because your view of it is just that. They're interfering with the economy. Now, what I see is much different. When I see these politicians behaving the way they do, that is a symptom of the underlying economic forces that are at play. Okay, okay, I will flip that then and say that the economics has an effect on politics. Absolutely, Jeff. Absolutely it does. The politicians will definitely respond to economics. Right? Absolutely they will. Money is real. Money isn't real. Money is real. Money is real. Currency is not. Currency is real in the sense that it is currency, but currency is not real money. Money can be currency. There's a difference. Money is like money is something that is Money is something that holds value, recognizable, transferable, tangible, right? These are the things that recognize as money. Currency is something that trades goods and services for other goods and services. Money can act like currency, but currency can never be money, because currency, in order to be money, would have to hold value over time. It doesn't do it, right? So money and currency are two different things. Money can act like currency, but currency can't act like money. Well, I mean, I guess it could have a characteristic of money for a short amount of time, but ultimately the definition of currency is generally used in a fiat manner, which means that there will probably ever increasing amounts of debt issuance and money issuance, which is essentially destroying the value of it in a purchasing power. So therefore, it can't be money. That's currency. Money doesn't circulate any longer. All right, money matters. Okay, guys, this was awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to call it quits. I'm going to go and get ready to go to bingo. If anybody happens to be in the Astoria area and you want to come and play the bingo game, it starts at 6:30. It's at the Workers Tavern. Goes till about 9 o'clock, and you might want to get there a little early because it has definitely been a popular game over the last few weeks. But, you know, it's a lot of fun, and I really encourage everybody to come check it out. So, again, if you happen to be in the Astoria area and you want to come check out the bingo game, it's at the Workers Tavern, and it starts at 6:30 every Sunday. 210 peep here. Yeah, we got 215 with 88 likes. Thank you so much for being here. Dice the next time. Yeah, I'll go get the dice out of the Explorer, and we'll do it. I personally don't buy into him calling them all to fire them. That makes no sense to me. Don't buy into him calling them all to fire them. That makes no sense to me. All right, have a good one. You play bingo? I don't. I call the bingo game. I did that when I was like 14 with grandma. A lot of fun. Yeah, this is a lot of fun too. It's not quite your grandma's game. I mean, there's a lot of grandmas there, but it's a lot of crowd participation, a lot of jokes, a lot of sexual innuendos. You know, it's a lot of fun. And it's very popular, and I really encourage everybody to come check it out because it's fun for me. It gets me to, you know, gives me a chance to get away from everything that I am doing so that I can go and grab the attention of a handful of people out there who really use the bingo night as their one night out. And if I can grab their attention and entertain them and make them laugh and make them feel good for a few hours so that they can, you know, be excited for the next week to come so that they can come play again, man, that's everything to me. I don't know how many people realize how enjoyable and satisfying it is as an entertainer to be able to do that for somebody, to be able to take them out of their reality for just a minute so that they can laugh and enjoy and hang out and be, you know, in a good environment that, you know, gives them some sense of fun and enjoyment. Yeah. It means a lot. It really does. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.